At this time, we will have comments from the public by, come forward.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter.
Not listed on the agenda, but you requested. I got approval by Mr. Henderson.
Permit me, I'd like to make a statement regarding the agenda. And I apologize for reading this out loud from this statement I wrote. I only decided to do this just a short while ago, barely got it written, much less prepared to present it. So I want to applaud the police jury for including an item to discuss the policies and procedures related to the hiring process. However, I would like to propose a couple of modifications or additions to the agenda. I agree the hiring process currently in place is broken and needs a massive rework. The hiring process I was a part of in early June was fraught with poor training, poor leadership, illegal activities, lies, and a colossal lack of integrity. Poor training was an issue because the 6 newly elected jurors have been through the police jury's hiring process twice since being elected. Yet on their third effort, some of them claim the process was broken, confusing. You would think 2 times would be enough to understand the process, how it works, but apparently not. I'm assuming their decision to question the results of the process had to be due to poor training for leadership or more seasoned jurors. The other explanation is that some of the new jurors only decided to question the process and claim confusion when their process didn't yield the results they were looking for. But then that would be dishonest, so I'm assuming it's poor training. Poor leadership was an issue because of the inconsistency with which the special meetings for hirings were conducted. During the March 3rd special meeting, candidates were interviewed, and then an appointment was made to the registrar of voters. Agenda item 7 from that meeting was resolution to appoint registrar of voters. During the March 30th special meeting, candidates were interviewed and then appointed and made for parish treasurer. Agenda item 6B from that meeting was recommendation of applicant for appointment as parish treasurer. During the June 1st and 2nd special meeting, candidates were interviewed, and then a recommendation for appointment was made for parish administrator. The process changed, even though the language on agenda item 6 from that meeting was exactly the same. Recommendation for applicant for appointment for parish administrator. Why did it change? Did the jury leadership suddenly decide the meeting was a committee meeting rather than a regular meeting? The agenda for the June 2nd meeting was titled Police Jury Special Meeting, not Personnel Benefits Committee meeting. However, let's just say the agenda was wrong and that the June 2nd meeting was in fact a committee meeting. When in the history of the police jury has the police jury overturned a unanimous recommendation from one of its committees? A committee, mind you, not made up of a few jurors, but comprised of the entire jury. So you, the jury, made a unanimous recommendation as though it were a committee meeting, which it wasn't, and then immediately decided that you, the committee, had no idea what you were doing. The whole situation is displayed poor leadership and an inability of that leadership to control the meeting. As egregious as these events are, they pale in comparison to the illegal actions taken by the police. First, despite your counsel's repeated attempts to get you to stop discussing what happened in executive session, many of you spoke about the vote you took. Voting in executive session is illegal. Second, the practice of the police jury to enter into executive session to discuss candidates for appointment is also illegal. The law states that you can enter into executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, and physical and mental health of a person. In that same paragraph, the law states, however, nothing in this paragraph shall permit an executive session for discussion of the appointment of a person to a public body. Appointing a person to a public body is precisely what you are doing. This practice should be abolished because once you are in executive session, you can say anything you want. I have it on good authority that lies were told in executive session with regards to my qualifications. How are those lies to be confronted with facts? Third, prior to the interviews conducted on June 1st, 2nd special meetings, a meeting of all 6 of the African American jurors was held at President Henderson's house so they could come to an agreement on who to vote for. This is before the interview. A meeting of 6 jurors at a location for the purpose of discussing police jury business is a blatant violation of open meeting laws. As I have shown, the hiring system is broken and ripe for abuse. Therefore, I believe you absolutely should discuss policies and procedures related to the hiring process. Furthermore, I believe the motion should be made to invalidate the entire hiring process for the parish administrator, rescind the appointment of Mr. Postel and appoint him as interim administrator, complete the revision of the policies and procedures in time to go through the entire hiring process again at the end of the year to coincide with the timing of Mr. Postel's annual evaluation. And lastly, publish a public apology to me, Mr. Postel, and all the other candidates. And if any of you think this is a ploy on my part to have another opportunity to get this position, I assure you it is not. I've learned my lesson and know that an honest man can't get this job on merits alone. However, this whole situation has a dark cloud over it, and I, ever the public servant, am trying to provide you with some ideas to fix it. My second request is to add an agenda item to this meeting to immediately remove Mr. Russell from his position as police chief. Mr. Russell showed a stunning lack of integrity by changing his vote from one meeting to the next. His decision to do so can't be blamed on a lack of training or confusion with the hiring system, because Mr. Russell has used this system many times and is an experienced juror. Instead, he changed his vote because he decided to look into the situation by examining the tally sheets. In doing so, he determined that there were irregularities in the voting, and that voting was not fair. How did you make such a determination? Maybe if the tally sheets were signed, you could apply some knowledge of the individual jurors' past behavior or their motivations. But the tally sheets were anonymous. Therefore, I can only assume that Mr. Russell engaged in some ungodly behavior. I don't claim to know much about God or spirits or magic. And maybe I watched too many movies. But the only way I can see that Mr. Russell came to such a determination is that he applied some wizardry or magic and used each tally sheet as some sort of medium, and then examined the mind of the anonymous person who wrote the numbers on the papers to ascertain their thoughts and motivations. If he's not capable of such ungodly witchcraft, then he's arbitrarily applying his own thoughts to other jurors' tally sheets. Some of you said that the tally sheets were stacked, and that's unfair. Mr. Russell is guilty of the same thing. He mentally changed the tally to be more like his own for some others' tally sheets. And then he determined that illegal voting should not have been 75 against Mr. Postel, but 75 for Mr. Postel. Therefore, he essentially cast multiple votes on his own rather than just one, which is highly immoral. Therefore, that due to the serious lack of integrity and either ungodly or immoral behavior, I believe a motion should be made to remove Mr. Russell from office. Now, I realize changing the agenda requires a unanimous roll call vote, so my request is not likely to pass. Mr. Pullen and Mr. Hunt have shown they are willing to do serious damage to the public's perception of the jury just to get the person they wanted in the position. So I doubt they'll be brave enough now to put his employment in jeopardy. Also, it's likely Mr. Russell, who's not here, or is not here, but it'd be unlikely he'd be brave enough to approve an agenda item to remove himself from office. But again, as the public servant that I am, I'm trying. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll go into board and commission appointment recommendation. Mr. Don Hogan here. Will you stand, please? Mr. Don Hogan.
And Ms. Hunter, if I may, these are just the recommendations at this time.
Okay.
We'll ask that the candidate be here at the next meeting. If the jury moves forward with the recommendation, we'll ask that the candidate be here next month for the appointment.
Okay. All in favor, Mr. Don Hogan, being Commissioner, Greater Ward 1, Waterworks District.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I can second.
You second?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's been moved and second that Mr. Mr. Don Hogan is, we would recommend Mr. Don Hogan for Waterworks District 1 district. The next one is Mr. Mike Ship, Northeast Louisiana Delta Human Service Authority. You know, it's been a hard, we've been working with Mr. Mike Ship for some time, and it has been hard for us to keep someone on that committee. And we're glad that you want to get back on the committee. All in favor of Mr. Ship, I need a motion. It has been moved and seconded that Mr. Ship become Northeast Delta Human Service Authority. All in favor? Negative the same? There's none. So Mr. Mike Ship is the Water District. And now we will turn the meeting over to Ms. Tanya, and she will be discussing and we will take action if necessary, policies and procedure related to person.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Remove my mask, my glasses on fire. Before we get started, this is just an outline. You all received a draft of the hiring procedures. These are the procedures that we normally take. They're just put in writing this time for official business. And of course, we will be in a draft, all recommendations, corrections, if you all want to make any changes, the floor is open. So we'll start, if I could, I'll start with the administrative positions. Administrative positions are considered as salaried employees, which are like the department heads, personnel, payroll, and our purchasing department. Everybody is salary, exempt employees from overtime, so forth and so on. So for that position, we'll advertise for 30 days on the Polish Jury website, in the local newspaper, and online for at least 3 times. Advertisement will include the job title, the description, starting salary, and the deadline date for applications to be submitted. The full description is normally posted on the Polish Jury website. The Polish Jury, according to the handbook, likes to promote from within. So we try to see if we have any employees that are eligible to move up and would like to fill the position. So if the position cannot be filled by an experienced person, then that's what we will ask the personnel committee to step in. The personnel committee, parish administrator, the personnel officer, and legal counsel if necessary. They'll review the application, select up to the top 5 applicants. They'll review, after the interviews, the committee will present 1 applicant to the jury for approval of hiring. If not, if they feel they would like to re-advertise for whatever reason, then they could re-advertise. But that is for, again, an administrative position. Anybody have any questions so far?
Now, Tanya,
Yes, ma'am.
when you said legal counsel,
Say for instance, like Mr. Lewis, he would be in
it
attendance,
would be an
but
attendant.
his vote will not be
His
counted.
vote will not count.
No,
He doesn't have a vote.
does not have a vote. He'll just be here, just in case, we need some kind of legal advice or,
Give his legal advice only if we ask for it.
only if you ask for it, yes. To make sure that everything is done, properly.
Okay.
But his vote, he will not be voting.
As structured currently, would the parish administrator or personnel officer have a vote? I think we might should clarify, even if that isn't the case, I think we might should
I
clarify.
pointed that out earlier, with, Hunter pointed that out earlier to clarify that, no, only,
I mean,
well, yes, the personnel committee, The parish administrator and personnel officer will have a vote, the legal counsel will
Yeah,
not
I
have a
think
vote.
that'd be great. I think
Yeah.
they need to vote on it.
Normally, that's how it is.
Okay, we need to vote on the personnel officer.
Yes,
We need to vote.
but the legal counsel will not have a vote.
Yeah, we could just clarify that as an ex officio member of the hiring committee
Yes.
or something like that.
Definitely.
Tanya, if someone think that it's something happened or some wrong big things done, can the legal counsel go on his own and inquire what happened?
He should be there.
But I'm talking about after the fact.
After the fact, can the legal counsel, can you clarify?
After the fact, for example, you vote. Can you go and pick up the votes and review them without Mr. Henderson being there?
The most, all paperwork that we do is public record, so if anybody would like to request it, they're more than welcome, to request it. We ask them to request to be in writing, form. So far as, if you wanna take a look at it, there's no reason he can't, look at it.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the first one, it says starting salary, and I understand that. Is there something we can do or say where if the salary moves up more than 25%, that job be re-advertised?
That is up to the personnel committee. You all have that decision. But normally in an administrative position, according to the handbook, of course we have levels, and we have salary ranges and salary pay. If they don't start at the beginning salary, then there is an option where they can have an additional salary, but they will not receive the 6-month probation increase. Every employee that enters into the parish payroll, they have a 6-month probation period. But if they start at a higher pay, they will not receive that 6-month probation increase.
I think your concern is that, if we're advertising only the starting salary, then we may preclude ourselves from a number of different applicants that would be interested in
If the job.
if it was more, right? And so, I think it was correctly worded in that, and it was, the starting salary and then negotiable
Depending on
experience and on qualifications, but it might make more sense, and this would be just an idea, I think would address your concerns, if you were to say, starting salary were to lie between this number and this number, depending on qualifications and experience, and put a range in there, would that address your concerns? And
That
say,
would help.
for the parish administrator, from $72,000 to $102,000, depending on qualifications. And it's kind of out of the norm for ordinary hiring, I would say, for how you would typically do that, but that might would address your
Well,
concern.
we always put the starting salary because that's the minimum that position would pay. And that's the reason you put depending on experience, depending on qualifications, because just because a position is advertised for one salary, that doesn't stop somebody from coming in and say, I know your position was advertised for $5,000, but based on the skills that I bring to the table, would you consider paying me $10,000? So
What is considered a reasonable range?
the range is reasonable if you approve it.
Can it be announced like, the federal, I'm from the federal side. You announce it as this level for this price, for this salary. But if you have this type of qualifications and this much experience, you move up to the next level and you get this salary. In other words, so
Right.
as a WS10, WS11, WS12, you're not limited to the lowest. but you have it in us. And that's why we talked about it in the hiring process, is if you have 20 years of experience, of leadership experience, you should be rated, you should be in this category, not in the beginner category or intro
Well,
level
the
category.
police jury, right now, we do not have levels of experience, levels of, years of service. So if you all would like to establish levels, then you can. But right now, we do not have levels, and I understand what you're saying, level 1, level 2, level 3. But what you also have to think about, I think we've had situations previously where you have somebody who has been here 20 years and they're making one salary, and now you bring somebody in who have, who say they have so many years of experience, who could come in starting at the same salary that you have somebody who's been here 20 years.
Yeah.
So, if you all would like to
Yeah, we do it all the time. I mean, it's based on years of experience and knowledge. So, yeah, I would recommend.
Let's skip that.
I like the way it's written in that this is our minimum. However, we would consider, depending on your experience and your expertise, will you?
Within a certain range.
We don't put ourselves in a box there. I mean, you know what I'm saying? We don't put ourselves in a box there. We're also not just
Exactly.
offering up.
Exactly.
It's hard to negotiate when you say,
I don't want to say
this is, right.
10 years experience you get this, 20 years experience you get. I want to say minimum, and then we would consider,
Well, that gives us the most flexibility.
just like you.
Lieutenant,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Hunter, I have something to say about the scoring sheet. It has nothing to do with the advertisement. I'm saying this to you all as jurors. If I find out that I'm using a tally sheet and somebody takes it upon themselves to examine or question how I feel, I'm going to be highly offended. That has nothing to do with the advertisement. I just want it understood. We have a secret ballot, and that's the way it should be.
The secret ballot, when you say secret, nothing is secret because all information is public information. It's secret when it comes to your name not being on the ballot. But if somebody would like to request a ballot and they put it in writing and request it, then it's public information. Nobody knows who did the ballot because nobody's name is on it. That's where the secret comes in. But it's not secret to where you can't see. If you would like to come in the office and see the ballots, the papers are there, you're more than welcome to look at it, but nobody knows who did what or nothing because there's no name on them.
I used the wrong term. As a matter of integrity, I think it behooves us to trust how somebody votes. That has nothing to do with the advertising. I'm just saying this is.
No, that doesn't. And since you spoke of ballot, then I'll continue and we'll get to
There's a
that.
hand.
I just wanted to note real quick that I did publicly request, I made a public records request for the ballots for the parish administrator, and that was not given to me. So just throwing that out there based on what you're saying, so.
I didn't understand.
He said that he made a public request and the ballots was not given to him. I'm not sure why. Did you receive
should
some
have
kind
been.
of response?
Should have.
I did, I turned it into Mr. Postel because that was what I was advised to do by the legal counsel. And I'm not complaining about that, you're saying a different thing. And so I just wanted to make it clear that that was not
Actually,
provided.
I'll be glad to respond to that. And Caleb, I provided him, there was actually the Attorney General's opinion that directly stated that rating sheets from interviews are not a matter of public record. So that's the Attorney General. Now, look, if y'all want to make it available, make it available. I was going based on the Attorney General's opinion that seemed to directly reflect what our situation was.
And I didn't want to argue that, I was just wanting to let y'all know what was actually going on. So.
The situation with the score sheet.
Let's move on.
When the score sheet was brought up and requested, our previous parish administrator said they were public records. So when the parish administrator states that it's public records, provide them the information, that's what was done. So not only that, you have the legal counsel come in and request the information. So where do you tell the legal counsel no?
So, because, excuse me,
Are we talking about future or
We're
present?
talking about past.
I'm
Past, or are we talking about what's gonna
I'm
happen?
addressing questions, because really we need to move on
Yeah,
with this.
so can we talk about the storage sheets in general? Like, why do we have to have storage sheets?
The score, okay, if you look under, parish administrator and, treasurer, it says the panel will receive a score sheet with the pre-selected questions to rate the applicants. After in the final interview, the panel will use the score sheet as a resource to discuss experience, salary expectations, compare notes to ratings, and may also choose to go into executive session per se. So you use the score sheets to rate the applicants. In my opinion, the score sheets have been done for 30+ years, so that's the purpose of this meeting. If you would like to change it, you're more than welcome to change it. This is just a process that has been going on before I even was put in this position. So
What if we
now is the time.
took the number off the score sheet? What if you had the question in a blank? And we can make notes on what we thought about every question that person answers. And then at the end of it, we kept it. Like, you picked up yet. We kept it. Everybody was done. And we went into session to talk about it. We wouldn't have a number that we're going by over who scored the best. But we could all sit and look and say, okay, this is what I thought. You know, you would have a general idea of who you thought did the best in the interview.
Right, but
And narrow it down, but there wouldn't be a number where it was somebody got beat by 1 point or 2 or 20 or 100, whatever it was. It would just be general question.
Well, normally with the score sheet, you say, this is, the person who have the highest score, so therefore you're more in favor of this person. There's always been discussion after the score sheets. There's never just been a time where it was saying, this is the score, this is the person, this is this. Even in the beginning, I've always said the final discretion is upon the jury. So you all have always had the opportunity to discuss after the score sheet.
Can I make a comment? Just be aware that I think if police jury were to provide you with a sheet that you make notes on, that, and you're not rating, at that point, it doesn't count, it does not qualify as a rating sheet. And you're making notes on an official police jury document, therefore it would be subject to public records. So, people would be able to see your handwriting and know what your notes said about individual candidates. So just be aware of that. It wouldn't be just seeing a number on the page, it'd be seeing your handwriting with your comments about individual candidates. So just make sure you're comfortable with that before you do that. Now, if you bring your own paper and you make your own notes, then those are your personal notes. And those would not be subject, because you can take those with you after the meeting and do what you want with them. Those would not be subject to public records from my perspective. Now, we really need Mr. Jones here for that opinion, but I believe that's correct. We can't take your paper from you and, you know.
Last week as well.
Yes, you may say.
At some point, I think you need to we need to individualize if we're gonna do a rating system or something, I think we need to individualize it, and that way, as you score, then your scores really just affect, the order and how you rank the candidates. And it doesn't all get mixed together in one pool, and all these points are going everywhere and going up and going down, if that makes sense. So I think you could do that in one or two ways. If we did want to collectively do it and get it back to, get it to Mr. Hyde to tally, then I think you could essentially, each candidate, you would rate all your scores, all your people, you would total them yourself per person. Or I guess he could do it as well. But then your top 3, the people that you rank as your top 3, they would get assigned, or your top 4, your top 5, they could get assigned a number, 1 through 5. Obviously, you want more points towards your top person, so your first person got. If you're doing 3, top 3, the first person could get 3 points, the next person could get 2 points, the next person get 1 point. Right? And so it's equally weighted when you collectively add up all the points, each juror, essentially, you're only getting your portion of those total points, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Complicated.
It's complicated, but it ensures that it's in the rating or the scoring. Some people even said voting, but it wasn't voting, it was just rating. It gets 1/12 voice into that overall pool of numbers, if that makes sense. Or, like Norrin said, we use those tools as a way to evaluate the candidate ourselves and simply be a catalyst for a conversation together collectively on the qualifications and who we think would be the best candidate. And I would prefer that we would just do number 2. It's least complicated. You simply take notes, do your scores, take notes. I mean, I took tons of notes and also did the numbers. But it could even do, this is how it's currently worded right now, Latonya, is that correct? Is this how this policy is worded right now?
We do not have a policy.
We don't have a policy at all. This
This
is simply a
a
draft.
draft.
There's nothing in writing
No.
on the score sheet. Okay. After the final interview, the panel will use the score sheets as a resource to discuss experience, salary, expectations, compare notes to ratings. I mean, as that is drafted right there, that would work for that. It doesn't say we have to give them to Mr. Hyde to calculate and tabulate and come up with these totals and all that stuff. We simply use it as a personal tool to rate our thoughts on who the candidates are. That's my thoughts. I don't think we need to give it all to Chris to type it all up and calculate them all. We need to have meaningful discussion here about why we think a candidate is the best choice for these particular positions.
But that has always been done.
Ma'am?
The discussion has always been done.
Yes, okay.
So, because it has always been done, I'm just doing this for clarification. That means we have to continue to do it, or is this the opportunity to change
It's
it?
just opportunity.
If you like
It's all on
to
the
change
table
it,
right now.
Yeah.
Every bit of it's on the table.
While you're thinking about that, let's move on to the non-administrative positions. Non-administrative positions are just the regular employee positions in each department. When a position is available, we'll advertise the position in a common place that's posted, the area is accessible to all employees for 7 days. Positions are filled by qualified employees promoted from within the police jury personnel system. If no one is properly qualified for advancement, the job will be filled at the discretion of the department head and personnel officer by hiring outside applicants directly or recruiting through an ad-hoc employment service. Superintendents, department heads, and directors are given the authority to hire on a temporary basis for an established position which has become vacant at the entry-level salary only. Individuals may work up to 180 working days on a temporary basis. What this is saying is that the position will be advertised in each department. If anybody would like to apply for the position, they're more than welcome to. If they are, as long as they're qualified, there is room for advancement. If there's no one that's qualified for the position, then the department head normally meets with me, and he or she will either hire from outside from somebody who have applied with an application, or they will go through the temp service. Normally when they work through the temp service, it's, the minimum is 180 days. And that's where that comes in, giving the department head or the directors the discretion to hire on a temporary basis. Normally when they hire on a temporary basis, after those hours are worked, then for the most part, they'll move permanently into that position. Any questions on non-administrative positions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Here it says, under the third, whatever, interview panel consists of personnel committee. Why is personnel committee not under parish administrator and treasurer? I thought-
Because the jury selects, the jury is responsible for the appointment of the parish administrator and the treasurer.
So it doesn't go through committee as it did before.
Those are full appointments, not hires, I believe, right? Those are both appointed
Yeah,
positions,
those are
not
appointed
not
positions.
hired positions.
Higher positions fall under the administrative position.
As we did before.
No, not for the administrative positions. The administrative position would consist of the department heads, my position, and Jerry's position, and Kevin's position. That's the administrative position, not administrative as in administrator. The administrator and the parish treasurer is appointed by the police jury.
We don't have any duties in hiring those particular persons.
The jury,
Jury. can have
no, the personnel committee.
personnel committee.
Plus,
For the administrative positions, like the department heads,
Yes.
the personnel committee.
plus the administrator and yourself, correct?
Yes.
With voting rights, essentially, with the personnel.
Normally, before, the personnel committee was not involved in that position. Wasn't, involved in that process. But it's best that somebody from the personnel committee or the personnel committee be involved in that process. So that's in addition to what has been previously done. Because normally it would just be the parish administrator, myself, and maybe the department head.
Latanya, what's your thoughts on the entire jury's serving in that panel for the administrative positions?
For the administrative field,
Until, that's correct.
the whole jury,
Yeah.
if,
I just want to know your thoughts on it,
oh, I don't see why not, if that's what you all would like to do.
but just your person, as our HR person, how would you feel? Regardless of what we think you feel.
Normally, when we have personnel committee, there are jurors that are involved, that's not on the committee, that are more than welcome. So,
Doesn't it go to the full jury after the committee?
No.
It doesn't?
not for, the department heads, or normally with the department heads, that's at the discretion of the parish administrator, previously, so just trying to get some kind of structure.
Unilaterally, pretty much, in the past, correct? It was been the two of you, Courtney and yourself, on the architects, correct?
Yes,
Pretty much.
well, depending on what department,
Yeah.
but for the most part, the department would have an assistant. So it's kind of, the assistant would be promoted to the department head.
So it's pretty, yeah, maybe
And so that would kind of fall under the discretion of the parish administrator. But I don't see what the jury, if you all would like to be involved in that process, I don't see where it would be a problem.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Any changes that I need to make?
Ma'am?
I'm just trying to find out the changes that I need to make.
Well, I don't think we can make any changes in that.
So will it be the personnel committee or will it be the police jury?
In the first.
The personnel committee for the administrative?
I'm fine, I just wanted to bring that up as a point of conversation that we would,
We're all discussing the committee meeting anyway.
Well, the personnel committee would bring it to the police jury.
I do think it's appropriate for it to be the role of the personnel committee, just personnel.
Yes.
I think that's the role for the personnel committee.
If you look under, it says the interview, the panel, it says after each interview, the panel will have an informal, let me see. After interviews, the committee will present one applicant to the jury for final approval. So the jury will still have the final approval. It says, the committee will present one applicant to the jury for final approval, and hiring or re-advertise for the position. So the committee is still, coming back to the jury.
yeah, so there'll be no duplicate that. Okay.
Any changes for parish administrator and treasurer?
I would propose that we, take Tracy's recommendation to essentially disallow a recommendation and then an appointment. To me, that's highly unnecessary, that we would have to recommend and then appoint. And it was a clear point of confusion through the last process. I don't know what y'all feel about that, but to me, it's unnecessary to recommend and then a week later to appoint. So if we clearly disallow that, I think that would be good, that we have clarity to that point. I think that can be done. It's under the parish administrator and treasurer at the top. We can just add it to the bottom there.
So instead of coming out and making a recommendation, you're gonna do nothing until?
Yeah, that we disallow even the ability to do that. Yeah, I don't even know why I was on there like that. Yeah.
So after the,
So we just don't, there's no need to have a recommendation one week and, one meeting and then have an appointment. I think we clarify that in policy there are no, I was hoping.
Honestly, I'm not even sure why the agenda, I think that was on the agenda. I don't know why it was on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't either, but I'm just saying, I think we should clarify and put it in writing that it shouldn't be done like that again.
Amen.
But that's kind of how it is, like right now. I'm just using this for an example, like right now, appointment recommendation. So they'll recommend, like for the Greater Ward 1, is that what you all not just did?
yeah.
That's what you just did, right?
That's probably what it was. If I may, I think that, yes, and that is a policy we probably need to go back and look at too. We have a 3-step recommendation policy when we put someone on a board.
That's required by law. So
Yes.
you have to give public notice for these applications for these boards, so that everybody knows, I think, that there's a vacancy on the board. And then you have to give notice that we're planning on appointing this person, so that everybody knows that we're planning on appointing this person, so they have time, I think, to voice their thoughts or whatever on that. And so I think by law, we're doing that because we have to do it on the, I could be wrong, correct?
I think that we
On
have to,
the public, on the boards.
we have to announce,
Yeah.
then we have to then we basically appoint.
And that's what we did.
But
And that was,
we can't announce that we can appoint, but I think because the jury has had a tradition of having the people here, we don't appoint until the 3rd month. So what we do is announce, recommend, then appoint, because they want the person there.
I
The
guess.
person doesn't know they're gonna get appointed until they've been recommended.
Okay.
It's been a tradition of
So
the
it could
jury.
be a 2-step process instead of a
It
3-step
could be,
process
but
to the public boards.
It would be required of basically everybody that's recommended to show up to the meeting and say, okay, I'm here, and one person gets recommended out of 3 people that might have been possibly get selected. That's why we do the 3-month thing, like the library, for instance.
so we're not gonna follow that.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just telling you what we do right now. Right now,
It's the
we
law.
announce, there might be 3 recommendations, we vote, we recommend, and then the next time we appoint them, because they don't know that they're being appointed.
Mr. Russell.
I've never understood why we require a person for the library board or the water system to come before us before we approve them. Is that written in concrete, or is there some reason why we do that? I just don't think that's a very smooth process.
It's been a tradition of the juries without the public.
I understand the tradition, but we can change
check
the
into
tradition.
that, Doug? Can you check into the
Absolutely, but I will tell you that my understanding is the same as Kevin's, because I asked that question.
that they're required, that they're required to come before the jury?
Madam Chair, I'm not on the committee, I don't even participate in committee meetings. I wait till the full jury. But back to his questions. Before, I forgot how many years ago, we was appointing people to all the different boards and never seen them. We had no idea who they were. I made the recommendation that they come before the jury so we can at least see the person
Okay,
and see
well,
if
there's a
they're
good reason.
and so that's how they got on there.
Okay,
But before then, a few years ago, we grocery at Walmart, and we know what we do. So I made the recommendation that they come before us, show their interest and thank us, whatever. And then we'll appoint at that time for the
Okay.
So that's how they got it. And I'm adamant with it.
Okay, as far as parish administrator and treasurer, I'll go down the bullet points and you all can make adjustments as needed. Advertise vacancy for 30 days on the police jury website, newspaper, online, a minimum of 3 times. Advertisement should include the job title, job description, starting salary.
We
Yes.
discussed earlier.
That's all you're okay. I said that is all.
They good?
To advertise the starting salary.
It's the only thing different.
No, I think this is all brand new, but that's how we've done in the past. It's just, I believe that's how the jury's done in the past, is that they've just advertised the starting salary.
Yes, you just advertise the starting position. Of course, you always include the, DOE, DOQ.
Maybe we clarify that in the policy. Is that clarified in there?
The starting salary.
No, the fact that we're negotiable, depending on qualifications and experience. I think we clarified
Within a
that.
certain range. Above that range, it should be re-advertised.
Above the range should be re-advertised.
What range? Are you talking about what we were talking about earlier? We're actually putting a top number in there? I just don't know if that's.
I don't like the top number. I like
It really.
based upon qualifications and experience.
It would, as far as.
It just seems to me unfair to the public to advertise for a job at $10 and then you decide to pay $30, and there's somebody out there who has a higher qualification who could have said, well, if I knew they were paying $30, I would have applied. I think we need to be transparent up front and say, this is what the job advertised for, this is as high as we would go. I don't care what kind of experience you have.
If we advertise and say this is the minimum and this is what we're going to pay, that's one thing. But if we say this is a starting salary and the actual salary that you get will be based upon your experience and your qualifications.
Well, that's where the
That's
DOE,
what it-
DOQ comes in.
Right.
Okay.
So if you're, I like it in theory, which is why I brought it up, right? But, if you're gonna tell somebody, and this, so you mentioned $10 an hour and $15 an hour, we should be able to always find plenty of people to work for $10 an hour. Not today, yeah, right, with the unemployment, we can't probably find
We need
anybody
to
right now.
review some of these salaries.
If you do that, if you put a salary range, the starting salary and the maximum salary, then there's no need for you to do DOE.
Right.
Because, and then when they apply for the position, they're coming in asking for the maximum amount of time.
That's what I was.
I don't care as long as we are consistent.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
You.
To be transparent and consistent. I don't want to do it for one person. One person comes in and we say, we're not negotiating salaries. And then the next person comes in and demands their own salary. That's not right.
It's not right, but that's where the discussion of the jury
That's
comes
where it
in,
comes in.
because if the jury say, if you have somebody that interview and say, I would like to request $60,000, then it's at the discretion of the jury to say, we approve that $60,000. It's at the discretion of the jury to say, no, this is what we're advertising for, but then you're not being consistent if you say the starting range, depending on experience. If they say, well, this is my experience, these are my qualifications. You see, it's either or, but you don't know what they're gonna bring to the table.
All those that night you were
The
listing,
salary ranges.
all those salary ranging F codes and stuff.
Those are the starting salaries.
Can we just not look at, put some qualification date, years on those codes
That's what I'm talking about.
that would say, if you got 20, then you could be here.
Sure, lock us in.
And that way, you could put a beginning and an ending salary, say the 20-year experience, and you could fall anywhere in here, but it's based on E1 or F1 to F, the numbers you gave out, but if somebody comes in with 20 years of experience and we all say, yep, you got 20 years of experience, we're not arguing over it. We know you could start out at 80,000 or 90,000 or whatever. But those E codes or F codes needs to have a dollar amount on them.
They do.
They do?
But I'm sorry, not a dollar. Years of experience or some type of qualifications for it. What makes an F12 person experience-wise?
This salary and pay schedule is for, for most of our employees. You're not gonna, have a truck driver that come in and say, you know, I wanna get paid $50 an hour. So far as the negotiating of the salary, that comes in under administrative positions
Right.
And the treasurer.
and not
Treasurer.
non-administrative
And
positions.
there's not much negotiating room whenever you're locked into a certain, like, when you're saying this, or this, it doesn't give us much flexibility.
Ms. Hunter, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. Franks, the issue that I would just mention with putting in that kind of structure is you may have someone with 10 years of experience that has just really knocked it out of the park in their 10 years of experience. But you may have somebody that's 30 years of experience and they've done just a mediocre job. But if you put them in that sort of pay scale, then you have to pay them for 30 years of mediocre work. Whereas you cannot reward the person that's done 10 years of just really outstanding work.
So we lose our
You
flexibility.
lose flexibility. That would be my only concern about it.
But that would be who we decide to hire.
Right. You can't,
If the guy knocks that apart,
but you're not rewarding for their work, you're rewarding for their years, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm boxing discussing. Ma'am?
Too much talking.
Yes, ma'am.
Group over here, group over here, group over here. So let's talk one at a time. Go ahead.
If you would like to have levels, I think the levels should be put in place when it comes to the parish administrator and the treasurer, but the other positions, I feel
Locked.
are good for the way they are. Because even if you have, somebody that's coming in on a start salary, and I'm just thinking our regular employees, if they say, well, I have 10 years of experience as a truck driver, then we'll start them at a 10% increase, but they will not receive that 6-month probation. So that's kind of standard for our regular employees. I think salary negotiation, that comes with administrative positions, higher level positions.
I don't think that the non-administration should be non-negotiable.
No, I think our non-administrative positions, I think that's fine. I think, the one thing we did add to that was the advertising, because previously throughout departments, other positions wasn't advertised. It was just kind of, word of mouth put into positions, promotion, but, that's something that we should do, advertise in each department for room for advancement, because some employees don't know that they can be, what positions they can move up to, so.
Are there any other questions for Latanya?
Is that on non-administrative positions?
That's on non-administrative.
I have a question. It says, if no one is properly qualified for advancement, do you mean through their regular evaluations?
Say for instance, we have truck driver 1, truck driver 2, truck driver 3. Well, you may have a position that's available for truck driver 3, and truck driver 1 and truck driver 2 don't have the qualifications to move into that position. So then the department head would need to look outside or look at other applications That's what it means when it says that they're not qualified.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on.
I will move on. Okay, so of course, the interview panel for the parish administrator and treasurer is the jurors, the personnel officer, and legal counsel, if needed. The legal counselor will be if needed, but he will not have a vote. Interview questions will be pre-selected in advance, and we ask each applicant. What we ask one applicant, we ask the other. Applicants will only be asked pre-selected questions, except when asked to elaborate on the answer. Next.
In the past, I know for the registrar of voters, you asked a question to each voter. We were told jurors could ask a question as long as, I wasn't pre-selected, but as long as we were asked it to each candidate.
Right. Well, previously, Courtney would send out an email and ask the jurors if they have any questions that they would ask. They would ask to get those questions in ahead of time before the interview. But I think sometimes we'll have the interview where you may think of a question.
Right.
If you think of a question, it needs to be doing that first interview, because after that first interview, you just need to make sure you ask all applicants the same question.
Should we clarify that in the policy, that we're able to?
Do you think that's a good question, a good policy?
Yeah, I think we should be able to have a voice as well, but that voice could be through Latanya prior to the interviews. If we say, hey, Ms. Latanya, I'd like to ask this question, and it could be part of the pre-selected questions as defined in the policy.
Right, if you have a question that you want to ask, then you're more than welcome to, just as long as it's in advance.
But how do you know until you've met the applicants? I'm not being difficult, I'm just being,
For the most part, all of the questions are pretty much the same, basic interview questions. If there's anything specific, then those specific questions will normally come from whatever department, because they are actually working in that department, so they would know what specific questions, to ask. But if you have a question, during that first interview, then you're more than welcome to ask it, like we did the last time. We just have to make sure we ask each applicant the same questions. So we're not saying you can't ask the question, just let that question be during that first interview and not the third or fourth one. The only time you ask the third or fourth person is when you ask them to elaborate on something. That has been
Have
said.
any other questions? You have 2 minutes. If not, thank you, Latanya.
So I guess you will schedule a meeting to go over job descriptions for next time.
And I would, Ms. Hunter, if it's okay, I would propose that we continue this conversation.
No, we have another meeting for.
No, not tonight, but I think we're not taking any action, obviously,
We're not taking any action.
so that we would continue this conversation on the hiring
We
processes.
won't continue, or we're gonna discuss number 6. We're not gonna discuss.
Not tonight, I'm just saying in the next meeting, when we discuss the job descriptions, that we finish the hiring, discussions on the hiring process.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Latanya. Any other business?
Thank you.
Any other business? No other business, we will continue this on our the job description next month.